Hello and welcome to Podtoid. We are your host. I'm CJ.
I'm Chris.
I'm Charlotte.
I am Occams.
You sound perfect, Occams. And this is episode 423. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We have a good show for you in store. Nope, that doesn't make sense. We have a good show planned. We're going to be talking about some Pokemon Sword, some upcoming Xbox games from its big presentation that it had this past week. And we're going to, of course, talk about the new Sonic for the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. That came out of nowhere and very pleasantly surprised with what they did. Plus, after the show, we're going to be doing another edition of Spoilsport, where Charlotte and I are going to be talking about the movie Parasite. Now, I know this is not usually the type of film we cover for this show, but it's certainly something that should be generating as much discussion as like a superhero film or a sci-fi film. So look forward to that after the show. How is everyone doing this week?
I'm jealous. That's what I am.
Yeah.
Because nowhere around my area is showing Parasite. So I have parasites around my area, but, I'm just gonna have to wait until it turns up on Blu-ray. Wink.
Yeah. To be fair, nowhere around me is showing it either. I just happened to be going near a theater when I got my car fixed this past week that was playing the movie. So it was more a matter of happenstance that we're able to do the Spoilsport today. Unfortunately, the theater also wasn't showing The Lighthouse, which Occams I know you've seen, and I really want to see, but now that one seemed to go pretty quickly out of our local theaters. So.
Yeah, actually, it's not out in Germany yet, but I saw a trailer for it when I went to see Parasite. It looks like it's going to be a hell of a trip. I really want to see that film.
And yet another example of why people need to stop complaining that Robin Pattinson has got the Batman gig. Because as we talked about on this show like months ago, he's a fucking great actor.
Yeah, he really is.
Yeah.
He's a great actor who's just been stuck with shitty material.
Well, and I would say that he has done a fairly good job of sort of casting off the Twilight mantle, and by picking a lot of movies and roles that are the antithesis of that.
Yeah. He plays a lot of scumbags.
He does, and The Lighthouse is a wonderful example of that.
I think the problem is that all of the films where he's casting off that Twilight stank are low budget films. They're indie films that people aren't going to go see. So, like the 70 million people who went and saw the last Twilight film, they're probably not going to see Cosmopolis or that one that was in space. Or Good Time, yeah. High Life. That's it.
That was really good. I went to see that.
Oh, I wish I would have seen that in theaters. I saw it on my big screen TV.
Podtoid's finally become the movie podcast I always hoped it would turn into.
On today's show, we're going to talk about Charlie's Angel and its failure at the box office.
Why did they make another one of those?
I don't know.
Because you remember Charlie's Angels. Remember, it was a thing that was once in existence. And if you remember a thing that once existed, then you want to throw more money at that thing.
Chris and I were having this discussion because, there's the thing going around on Twitter on what is your favorite film for each year of the last 10 years, marking the end of the decade. And I was telling him that as I was going through all the movies that released over the last decade, there are so many remakes I completely forgot they created. Like for the life of me, could not remember that we remade RoboCop.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did, man.
And
Total
that was
Recall.
Yeah, Total Recall I remember because it has Colin Farrell in. But Poltergeist, we remade that one. I mean,
God, we did.
Yeah. This is discovering these movies is like discovering a terrible lost ark or something. It's like, oh my God, these exist.
We just remade Child's Play, even though they're still making Child's Play movies.
That is true.
Like, they're still making sequels, but they're being caught up. They're like going to lap themselves soon.
It's going to be like a Godzilla situation where they're going to have like current Godzilla fight the 98 Godzilla, fight the original Godzilla.
Child's Play Final Wars.
I'd watch that.
I'd love the idea of like a really good CGI Godzilla, but versus like a dude in a rubber suit.
That'd be amazing.
Oh, yeah. This is just Movie Toy now. So look forward to that after the show. Unfortunately, we don't have Dan on the show today, but we will press on. And before we get talking about games, I actually have a story that it's about a new museum exhibit that's, I think, sort of in your neck of the woods, Chris. A few years ago, Iceland hosted a museum exhibit that was all about the penis. It was just wall-to-wall dicks, like Elton John's house. A woman named Florence Scheichter, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, found out about the museum and wondered why there wasn't a female equivalent. So a crowdfund £50,000 later, and she has decided to make her own exhibit about the vagina, saying, quote, "I just love the vag." The exhibit is being held in the indoor space at Camden Stables Market. Is that anywhere near you, Chris?
It's in London, so
Okay.
It's in England.
Well, to be fair, like whenever I go back to the UK, people will be like, "Oh, I have to go to Manchester for this thing. It's ages away." Whereas, like, I travel that distance twice on a weekend on a regular basis in Germany. Like, but it is like I'd say probably 3 hours away from where you live by car, right, Chris?
Yeah.
London.
Yeah, pretty much.
So
But
anyways,
I'd go to London for a good exhibit anyway, so it doesn't matter.
well, hopefully you like this vagina exhibit because it's going to be there through February. That has so many different art pieces that all have to do with the vag. There is a giant sparkly tampon surrounded by giant sparkly menstrual cups, and yes, they have sparkly blood too. There are illustrations of vaginas all over the walls, and I saw some pictures of crocheted vagina earrings for when you just gotta fuck that ear. But don't think that everything at this exhibit is all just hee vagina stuff. Scheichter says that too many people don't know enough information about the vagina, so the exhibit is also informational. According to a recent YouGov survey from March, a majority of British residents could not describe the function or visibly identify the vagina, the labia, or the urethra.
Charlotte, you're pretty comfortable right now. Why don't you tell us about all that?
I was just really thrown that when you started this, you were like, oh, I can't remember your exact words, but you said something along the lines of, "Oh, Chris, this sounds like something up your neck of the woods," and
It's
then
in
you were
your
like,
neck of the woods, yes.
yeah, and then X, Y, and Z about penis. Penis exhibition. Then that turned into X, Y, and Z about a vagina exhibition. And it wasn't until you said that it was in London that I knew you actually meant it's in your neck of the woods, your location. I thought you just meant this is perfectly attuned to your interests. I thought that's kind of what you meant. I was like, where are you getting that from? But
Well, off the air, you're just always talking about your love of the vagina, so I just assumed you're just always slaying it out there.
non-stop.
In
In
fact,
fact,
go ahead.
they call me vagina Chris.
Your Death Stranding name is Vagina Man.
Vagina Man.
By the way, if you like what you see at the museum, then be sure to head to the gift shop and stock up on some stocking stuffers, literally, for the whole family. There are vagina museum cups, vulva postcards, and vagina guitar picks, which I now realize, those kind of do look like a vagina. As I said, the exhibit runs from now through the end of February. And by the way, the name of this exhibit, and Occams, I'm sure you'll enjoy this, Muff Busters.
Hell yeah.
Who are you gonna call?
It's like a lesbian Ghostbusters porno.
Yeah, wow. That's exactly what that name sounds like.
I would agree if I didn't think that already exists somewhere.
Oh, I'm sure it does. Yeah, like, oh, there are a bunch of ghosts in my pussy. Can you come get them out? And they come in with like some like insane rotating dildo thing.
Just like a ghost-busting dental dam.
Oh, what happened to Movie Toid? It was so good.
This is a vagina toid now. I'm sure that'll bring in a lot more listeners than Movie Toid, let's be honest. Our most watched video on YouTube is still Girl Sells Her Bathwater, so...
Yeah. And I think the second most watched is one that's just got like an anime girl in the as the image, I think. So.
Oh, that's our audience. But
No,
yeah,
that's just everyone's audience.
that's everyone.
It's not. Your video could be about like worming a dog or whatever. As long as you put an anime girl in like the thumbnail, you're gonna get a million viewers.
I wonder if there's an anime starring a hot anime girl about worming dogs. I mean, I'm sure there's everything else at this point. There has to be something like that.
Oh, I feel poorly. Can we just move on?
Yeah, let's go ahead and move on to talking about games. And I will go ahead and start us off because by the looks of it, I'm the one playing the biggest game of the week. And that is not Star Wars Jedi something Order. Fallen Order. That's what it is. But I am playing Pokemon Sword. And on Saturday, I published my review in progress of the first 6 hours of the game. 1 second.
Oh my god.
I even tilted way away from the microphone for that one.
It sounds like you just talked to the ghost of an old tree.
Oh, where was I? Oh, that's right. 6 hours into Pokemon Sword. There was a lot of nonsense this week on Twitter. The hashtag GameFreakLied was trending, and then you had all of these videos and little GIFs of people like zooming in 400% to show something that I guess I'm supposed to care about. I don't know. I immediately tuned that out because, going into this, I didn't want anything like harshing my buzz on what this game could be or affecting my judgment of it. But, in the first 6 hours, I was having a good time. And now that I am 17 hours into the game, as of the recording of this podcast, I'll probably have it beat by the end of today, if rumors about how long it is ring true. It's another solid entry into the Pokemon franchise. As of right now, I don't think I'm enjoying it as much as I did Pokemon X or Pokemon Ultra Sun, which was the last one I played, but it's certainly not the abomination that people on Twitter tried to make you think that it was. Yes, there are far fewer Pokemon in this game than in the last game, but the ones that are new for the Galar region are, with the exception of one, frankly adorable. Yapper the dog is just... I want to hug and squeeze it all day and never let it go because it is so cute. And the dog that it evolves into is also just like it's like your childhood dog and just how happy it was to see you every time you got home. The Galar region variants I don't think are as memorable as they were back in Alola, but they still fit the theme, because this is supposed to be, the Galar region is supposed to be representative of the UK, and so you have the industrial one, you have the Mewth here that looks like a Krampus or something. It's freaky looking, and so the adventure is pretty typical of a Pokemon game. In the last one you kind of got rid of the traditional gyms, but they are all back here in force. I've played through 6 of them so far, and so, if you have played any type of Pokemon game before, you're going to feel right at home with this one because they haven't made all too many changes. The changes that you'll find in the game come with quality of life. One of the things that people have talked about is that the XP share is now permanent, but there are other changes as well that get into the nitty-gritty of how you raise each individual Pokemon, its stats, its moves, stuff that I cannot go over on the show because I did not write anything down, and there's no way in hell I'm going to remember it from the top of my head. But Necro, who is a moderator on our site, oh god, no, he is like an encyclopedia on this shit, and so he's just going over every individual change that's been made and how it's going to be a lot easier for people to get their optimal Pokemon.
He whizzed through that game as well, didn't
Yeah,
he? I think don't they get it a little earlier in Australia? I think maybe they did, but he's like done, isn't he? He's seen the end credits. He's fucking rolling through the end game now.
Yeah, I think he got it Thursday, which was his Friday, and then he finished it on our Saturday. Time's weird. I don't get it. So one of the things that I have noticed about the Galar region is that there's less emphasis on how Pokemon fit into the world. Like in Ultra Sun, they kind of weren't just creatures who were researched, but they were part of the Alola region culture. Here you see them working in shops and restaurants and whatnot, but they're not really ingrained into the identity of the region as much as they were in the last games. But But the region, by the way, the art direction here is amazing. Outside of the wild area, which is mostly, it's just different spots of tall grass, and there's not really that much that's visually interesting about it. All of the routes and all of the towns and all of the places you go to have just like really stunning art direction. There's a town that is in the woods that has mushrooms that light up in neon colors that is just fantastic. I love the look of it, even though this is clearly just the 3DS games framework being put on to the Nintendo Switch. Like I look at this game, and aside from the HD resolution and the lack of pixelated artwork that was in Ultra Moon and Ultra Sun, everything here looks like it would work on the 3DS, if you get what I'm saying. Like they just took that engine and moved it to the Switch.
Right.
And obviously that's a point of contention for a lot of people. Obviously when what's his name at Game Freak talked about doing new animations, he clearly was only talking about new animations for new attacks, because you have legacy attacks like double kick, where it's just the character hops and then there's a foot on the opponent, and multiple people have that. So obviously, you'd either have to do individual animations for each character that can get that, or you just go the simple route, and that is what they did. So Pokemon Sword and Shield going on the Switch isn't the same kind of revolution for a series that we got with, say, Breath of the Wild or Super Mario Odyssey. It's not going to be a transformative game, especially not in the same way that, say, X and Y was. But it is just, it's taking the formula that they established in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon and moving it to the Switch. The one main point of contention I had in my review in progress was about the difficulty, and I was hoping that it would start ramping up a little bit after the first 6 hours. Unfortunately, it doesn't. The main quest line is still painfully easy, and then all of the raids that I have been doing with other players or NPCs, I've for the most part been able to one-shot these giant Dynamax Pokemon. Getting connected to other players for these raids has been an absolute crapshoot. The way that they have you go through and connect with other players, I don't think is beneficial to the game. Like they needed to rethink that, and with updates, I think they should rethink it from scratch, because it doesn't work. It doesn't work as well as it should, and it doesn't work as a main selling point for this game. And it's a shame, because it is fun seeing what other players have created for their characters and which Pokemon that they have, and seeing their Dynamax or Gigantamax forms if they have it. One thing I want to say before I end, I talked about the Yamper and then Wooloo. Like so many of the new Pokemon here are just, they're just either adorable looking, or I really like what they did with the style. There's one that's called Carcoal that is basically just a minecart filled with coal. And I love that. I love that concept because it's so out there. But of note, Grookey, which is the grass type starter, has by far the ugliest evolutionary line of any starter Pokemon ever. This thing is hideous, and my rival, Hop, who was annoying, that's the one that he picked. And so I have to see each ugly version of this Pokemon as it continues to evolve. And it is just like, blech, just the absolute worst.
Well, I think that's a bit mean, to be honest, but that's fair enough.
No, everyone agrees with me listening to this podcast right now. I know it.
Dude, I'm just waiting to do another Occams Dex with Pixie, so I don't know what the hell you're talking about at all. Oh, I go in just completely, I don't know anything about these Pokemon. I don't know nothing about none of these here Pokemon, but I'm excited the opportunity to see them and describe them in perverse ways.
I see that Scorbunny becomes a bit of a bastard as he grows up.
Yeah,
bastard.
Like every part of his evolution looks like a different variation of a 90s platform character. Like his first one is like this happy-go-lucky bunny that you would have seen on the NES, and then his second form is like if they tried to reinvent that character on the on the PlayStation to give him a little more street cred, a little more
Edge.
gritty, a
Right,
little more
right.
edge, a little more raw. And then his final form looks like they tried to reinvent him again on the PlayStation 2 as just this cool 2000s character. So yeah, he is the history of video games in one character.
Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it. It'd be cool. I'd like to get around to it at some point. I don't know if I will. I think Sobble looks quite fun. I remember I made the comment back in the day that Sobble's kind of resting face looks like he walked in on his parents while they were having sex, and he's just been like that ever since. But I kind of like. There's some cool looking characters in there. I like the one that's just like, is it like a ghost in a teapot or something?
Yes, and I just caught that one actually.
Right.
It's originally a ghost in a teacup that possessed a teacup, and then you have to find a cracked pot and you give it to it, and then it evolves into essentially it's like a hermit crab going, or I don't know if it's a hermit crab. That's not a hermit crab. It's a crab, one of those fucking sea life things that leaves its shell and then goes and
Just moves on to other ones. Yeah.
Yeah, it just goes and makes a new home in a Coke can that was thrown into the ocean or something. That's basically
That's
what
a
this
hermit
is.
crab.
That's a hermit crab?
Yeah.
Oh, right. I know ocean stuff.
I love that I love that they're just kind of moving on from animals, and now they're just like, fuck it, minecart with coal in it, teapot that's broken.
I said they're going the Kaiser Sose method of Pokemon.
Yeah, literally. What else is in this office? Waste paper bin.
Well, do you guys know the story behind the teapot one, right? So
Fill me in on your lore.
Well, it's like, I guess, meta lore in this case. There was someone who posted on, I want to say Reddit, their idea for a Pokemon that was this teapot Pokemon, that was a ghost Pokemon that lived in a teapot, and then that person ended up getting a job at Game Freak. So they were able to implement this idea that they had a decade plus ago into the new game.
That's cool. I like
That is cool. I like that. I love that.
Fun.
But yeah, I if you're a serious trainer who is all about filling out that dex, all about min-maxing your characters, all about getting having your favorite Pokemon there, you may be disappointed by the lack of the national dex in this one, and the lack of 500 or so Pokemon that they have created over the past 20 years that just aren't going to be in this game. And, knowing going forward that mainline series may never have every single Pokemon in them again, although based on the reaction to this one, that may change. So who knows? But other than that, it's a solid adventure in vein of the more recent titles. So that's what I can say about it right now. Look forward to my full review when I've finally completed it. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to Chris. Chris, what have you been playing this week?
I've been playing a little bit, well, not a little bit. I played a good chunk, pretty much finished Terminator Resistance, which is the latest in a long, long, long line of Terminator video games, dating all the way back to, I think, 1990. I think was the first, like the MS-DOS one. Mm-hmm. And it's not very good. It's just a very mediocre title. It's made by Teon, who are like a small Polish developer, and are best remembered for that like abysmal Rambo game that came out a few years ago. That's like the Rambo rail shooter.
Destructoid gave that a 1.
I think so. And this is a huge step up from that because it's more of a game. That was a rail shooter. It's like a game that's like an open world game, but it's just a selection of closed off sections that you kind of hop between. So it's like lots of very, very, very small open worlds. And it's set in the future war, like post Judgment Day, and you're this private from the Resistance who gets separated from his squad, and you meet up with this ragtag bunch of like humans, and then you basically go on a load of missions that you wouldn't go on post Judgment Day. Missions like there are things you are doing for the Resistance, recon, destroying Skynet bases, Skynet properties, but there's all these side quests that are like a kid's like, can you go back to my old house and collect my chalk? And I appreciate that what they're doing there is they're kind of what the game basically feels like more than anything else is like a Fallout 3 kind of deal where it's got trading and you go through abandoned houses and you collect tin cans and shit, and it's got like a kind of really very basic crafting element, and you meet all these characters who are all like, you know, people in rags and stuff, and they're all and they tell you their stories of who they were before the war, and then they send you on these Fallout style missions where you can, if you want, go to the old factory and get their box of tools and bring it back to them and stuff, but it's all very inconsequential. And like, I want to summarize this because my full review is coming next week, at the beginning of next week, so you can read that. But basically, it's like Fallout 3 if it was made on like the PS2, but in terms of design, because although the game doesn't do anything wrong in the sense of the game isn't broken, it's very much how we used to design games a good 25 years ago, in terms of map layout, the way the story's fed to you, the kind of side quests you go on, the quality of the voice acting, the script and the story. Like, it has a moral compass where you can say things to different people and it changes the ending and it changes people's reactions to you. But it's as black and white as you're either a prick or you're not a prick. Like, a character says, like a little boy says to you, "Will you help me?" And you can say either, "Of course I will, young man," or you can say, "Fuck off, kid, I'm busy." It's that kind of black and white. And there's these two women in it. One of them's like the member of your party, and the other one's this badass commando girl. And they look exactly the same. And basically, the one you're nicest to, you get to have like PS2 sex with. But it's that kind of bland. It's just like... be really like, they start arguing and the one you side with you get to fuck, which kind of almost, it reminds me of like the way kind of women were treated in the biker game that I mentioned a couple of shows ago, Right to Hell 1%, whatever it was called. Yeah. and so like there's stuff that looks good in the game, like the explosions look good and there's some good light and shadow, but the AI's dumb, the characters move very rigidly. Nothing in the game is so much faulty. It's just really, really dated in how you make that kind of a game, in how you build that kind of a story, in the journey you send players on. It's got like a really basic front end. And I said this in the review, in my review in progress, and I'm going to clarify it again here. Not every game can be Borderlands. Not every game has Activision behind it, fucking pouring money down its throat. Do you know what I mean? Like, and we shouldn't think that every game can be like Call of Duty Modern Warfare in terms of what it looks like, what it sounds like, how much they pile into it and all that. And you know, that's really important to remember. The problem is Terminator Resistance is still $60. And at a time when there's so many great releases out there for the same price, and it has this one single player campaign that's about 8 or 9 hours long and nothing else. And that campaign is really kind of dated and old school. So it's just not worth the money, basically. If it had come out either last gen or the gen before, and it was maybe $20, then I'm sure diehard Terminator fans could get a kick out of it. But there's just nothing here that in 2019 you can be like, this is what I want from a video game.
It definitely seems like they were banking on Dark Fate being a much bigger film than it ended up being.
This kind of leads me to something that I was going to mention, not so much a debate or anything, but talk about with you guys, which is just, so Dark Fate's come out and it's basically not done very well, right? It's had a pretty poor launch.
Right.
The box office isn't great for it. And that's like this new Terminator movie, and it's got Arnie and it's got Linda Hamilton in it. And I think everyone kind of feels the same way about Terminator. Everyone basically likes the Terminator and likes Terminator 2 Judgment Day, and then kind of is up or down, but mostly down on 3 going forward, and some of the spin-offs and some of the other ideas. There's been some all right comics, and there's that Sarah Connor Chronicles show. And then there's been Salvation and Genesis, and now Dark Fate. And Dark Fate has kind of bombed at the box office. And I just kind of wanted to throw this out there to you guys and to see what you think. Like, The Terminator's great. It's one of my favorite films of all time. Terminator 2 Judgment Day I also think is excellent. I don't think it's as good as The Terminator, but I think it's an excellent movie. Mm-hmm. Is the Terminator franchise a franchise that, like Fox, I think it's Fox, right, are just determined to keep pushing, but actually no one really wants more Terminator stuff? Like, they're always happy to see the character and they like the universe, but with all these bad games and bad further movies, and then you make movies that have actually got the original characters in, and still no one's going to see them. Like Terminator was just supposed to be an independent production that made a few bucks, and Cameron made a great job of it and got Terminator 2 and made a great job of that. And I guess my point, I'm going around in circles, but my point is basically, I wonder sometimes whether Terminator really is something that needs to keep going, and whether it's iconic, but no one actually wants anything more from it.
That is 100% true. I think the Terminator film franchise was great for its time, but its time ended right around the time that Rise of the Machines came out. Without James Cameron at the helm, I mean, because the problem is that we have franchises today that are nurtured. You will have a release, and then 2 years later you'll have a release, and then 2 years later you'll have a release. This is why Fast and Furious movies make $1 billion at the box office, because we now have this formula down for how to properly do franchises, like extended movie franchises. And Terminator came about in an era before that, and then never really conformed to it. So, you had the Terminator, and then you had Terminator 2, and then it was like, 10 years later we got Terminator 3, which people were still excited, I guess, to see because it made a lot of money, but I don't know anyone who likes that film. And then a few more years went by, and then they just keep changing up actors. They changed the time of the film of when it's placing. Resistance was not really a sequel, like a direct sequel of Rise of the Machines. It was
Salvation.
Did I say Resistance? Yeah, Salvation. Okay. And then you had Genesis, which I guess was a soft reboot of it that they planned to make into its own trilogy, but then that one bombed, and so you don't have the staff or the people behind this film that have been nurturing it in a way that you need a movie franchise to be nurtured to continue to make money. My point is that the Terminator franchise, because it has shifted so many hands, because it has different directors, because they only just got James Cameron back on board as, I think, just the producer of Dark Fate, you haven't had the behind the scenes people making sure that is consistent enough for movie audiences to care about it. And when you couple in Salvation and Genesis, which are just two bloody awful films, you've kind of killed all the interest that there could be in Terminator.
It feels like a universe that's trying to happen, that has been trying to happen for like decades. But
yeah,
this is going to sound really militant because I know there's Terminator fans out there, and I fucking love those first two movies. I fucking love them, right?
Yeah.
But the last good Terminator thing, the last great, excellent Terminator thing happened in 1991. And the latest Terminator thing happened this year and has Arnie and Linda Hamilton in it and James Cameron as a producer, and people aren't going to see it. Like, I just think the writing's on the wall there, personally.
I agree. And also,
and when they make a game, but the game's made by like a studio that has one big game to its name, and that game was considered one of the worst games of all time, but Heimdall were quite happy to be like, oh yeah, you can have the Terminator franchise to make your game, which shows that they don't. It's not even like they're caring so much about the control of who gets to play with the franchise, if you know what I mean. This is Terminator-toid. I'll move on now, but it's just something I was thinking about in the wake of this game and in the wake of the box office to the new movie.
Also, I just want to point out, and I've pointed this out to you before, Chris, every Terminator film has the same plot, and that is something they've never been able to fix.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good plot, at least twice.
I have no opinion on the Terminator because what you say is the last good thing from the Terminator is older than me. So and to be honest, my parents forced me to watch a lot of the Die Hard films, but they were never into the Terminator films, so I've never watched any of them. I'm just like, oh, that's Arnie. Okay.
It's kind of funny because I actually forgot to squeeze it in, but when knowing I was going to talk about this, I was actually going to say at one point, we all remember where we were when Terminator 2 came out, especially you, Charlotte. You know, I forgot to say.
I was in the womb.
By the way, Die Hard, there's another franchise that just needs to die.
Hard.
Yes.
With a vengeance.
let's go ahead and move on. Occams, you have nothing this week?
No. I watched Contact.
The Jodie Foster film?
Yeah, and it was fun seeing Jodie Foster pretend to like men as much as it was fun seeing Matthew McConaughey pretend to act.
I have a friend who really likes that film, but I haven't seen it. Were you not a fan? No.
It was fun. It was incredibly heavy-handed. Like the writing was just fucking stupid, but I enjoyed it. It's worth a watch once. I don't know if I'd go back to it, but it just kind of laughing at some of the dialogue. They had an agenda, and you could tell.
Yes, they did. And that ending, oof.
Mm-hmm.
I watched a movie called Dolls, but from 1986, and it was fucking great. And it was about killer China dolls. You know, like the the kind of the bone china dolls that wear like Victorian dresses. Yeah, and I'll talk about that next week. But that was good stuff.
All right, so let's go ahead and wrap this up with Charlotte. Charlotte, you are still on that Professor Layton kick.
Yep, I'm playing Pandora. What's it called in English? Pandora's Box. That's the one I'm playing. Pandora's Box. It's I feel like, to be honest, Lost Future compared with what's it called? Not Miracle Mask. The mask. Yeah, the one for 3DS. Like I could barely tell any difference in terms of like the sort of difficulty level of the puzzles and how good the story was. They were both sort of on par with each other. Whereas Pandora's Box definitely feels like they still need to learn how to do a Professor Layton game. Some of the puzzles are stupidly easy and some of them are just a nightmare, like there's no in between. And so far the story's kind of a bit not super inspiring, but it's good enough. I'm just going to keep playing it and see how I feel as it goes along, as the train travels along the tracks, so to speak, because it's set on a train so far.
Oh, you're still really early into it then.
Yeah, I'm probably 3 hours into it, I think.
Okay.
So I've been clicking on everything, so it could be that I'm actually, for standard how people play it, actually even earlier in. But I'm not super taken with it at the moment, but I know that I feel like I've played this one before as well. That I'm not getting as much deja vu as I did with Lost Future, so
right.
Yeah. But I've only just been doing bits and pieces of that because I'm preparing for a talk that I gave yesterday at a games festival in Hamburg. So I gave a talk on how my day job crosses over with this game stuff I do. So that was really nice. And I've realized that from my days when I was teaching university students that I completely zone out when I give presentations and I don't really pay attention to what I'm saying. And yet what comes out of my mouth makes perfect sense. So that's a new skill.
I was going to say that's an art form in itself. I might need you to give me some lessons on that, to be honest.
You kind of have to, otherwise you just get you're like, oh my God, I'm on stage. Oh my God, I'm talking to 30 people. Like, you kind of have to develop that skill, because otherwise if you have mild stage fright or anxiety like I do, it just becomes impossible.
When I took public speaking classes in college, I found that my biggest thing was that I started to shake when I got on stage and started talking. Like I was really cold, just start shaking. And it was very noticeable to people. That didn't help, that they noticed how nervous I was.
Should have just come on stage with a space heater. just hug a space heater.
I have a problem of always changing stance. Like I can't fucking stand still. Like I'm always like moving. But I don't mean I'm walking around. I just mean I'm constantly, like I'll put my right foot forward and then like my left, and then I'll fucking part them and then put them together, and it just looks like I'm doing like calisthenics or something.
you look like martial law from Tekken.
Yeah. Did it go well though? Yeah.
Yeah, it went fine. I was told that I made perfect sense, but to be honest, it was like a speaker's corner type thing, so it wasn't very serious. And I don't know how many people were paying attention or playing about on the phones, which I can't complain about that because I was playing about on my phone on some of the presentations as well. So it was just a very chilled thing.
You should have been playing about on your phone while you were giving the presentation. Just be like, just be like in the middle of it, just like, sorry, I gotta do these messages. Just gotta buy something off eBay.
Just got to get one more level done on Candy Crush.
You are listening to Podtoid.
That is it for games, but we have some headlines to cover. It is time for the news. And this was a particularly busy week for gaming news. We're not going to cover every story, but we got two here. And this last week kicked off with the big reveal we've kind of all been waiting for, the redesigned Sonic for the upcoming Sonic the Hedgehog movie. As you may remember, the original design, as well as the crotch shot movie poster, were heavily criticized when they were revealed back in, I want to say, February or March of this year, prompting the studio to delay the film into 2020. Fun fact, if they didn't do that, we would be talking about this film already because it would have come out last week. Anyways, after saying that they were going to redesign Sonic, and God knows how much effort was put into that on that poor special effects company, Paramount dropped a new trailer this week showing off Sonic, and what did you know it? It actually looks like Sonic the Hedgehog. The eyes are right, the gloves are right, the height is right. The movie even kind of looks better because the trailer cut out all of the bad jokes from the original one, which is nice because the jokes in this one are, they're not laugh out loud hilarious, but they're also not eye-rolling, blood coming out of your ears bad. We also got our first look at Sonic's homeworld, and it really does look like it does in the games, although with much better graphics. So, Chris, you wrote about this story earlier this week. What did you think of the new trailer?
I thought it looked pretty good. I kind of take the stance that a lot of people have taken where I think Sonic looks great now, but I don't think the film looks particularly better. I don't feel any better about the film. Mm-hmm. But I think Sonic himself looks great. I did think Green Hill Zone, when they showed that, it did look wicked with they got in the loop, which you kind of have to have in there. I wasn't really a fan of the way the trailer was cut. I thought it was a little too long, like a lot of trailers are. I think the art making trailers is kind of a lost art. I don't really think anyone knows how to do it anymore. But that film isn't made for me. And as I said, like in the article, I hope it's everything that Sonic fans are hoping for. I'm really glad that they're getting a Sonic. It's only those side-by-side shots that really show how improved he is. Like in your head, you're like, "Oh, that looks better," but when you see the two pictures next to each other, it's like it's 5,000% better. Do you know what I mean? Absolutely. But the film isn't. The film isn't for me. But I hope that Sonic audiences who could really use a break with something good, they had Sonic Mania. Do you know what I mean? Which is like the only good Sonic game in 30 years or whatever. But I'm hoping that this film is everything that they hope it will be. Do you know what I mean?
Right. And I'm still interested in seeing at least Jim Carrey and how much of the scenery he chews throughout this movie. But one of the things I thought after seeing this trailer is that if this were the first trailer that came out, even if it had the bad Sonic design in it, it would have made me more interested in seeing the film than the original one because of all of those bad jokes.
It's something I'm glad they made him look more like the video game. I kind of liked how freakishly horrible it looked in the original, but that's more of like a David Lynch cartoon thing, and that doesn't really work for a Sonic movie.
Man, now I want David Lynch to direct a Sonic the Hedgehog movie.
God, it'd be great.
Yeah, the movie just doesn't look like my kind of thing. Like the trailer didn't make me laugh at all. It just was kind of, just felt a bit naff to me.
Yeah.
And it does seem like an improvement, but there's been a lot of concern about, how far it was right to make those improvements and to, potentially put people under a lot of stress and leave them with a lot of work.
One of the things I read on Twitter is that one of the people who work at the special effects company said that they basically just went back to their original design, which really just seals the fact in that the people making this movie have no fucking clue what they're doing.
It just doesn't seem to me like... I'm not a major Sonic fan. I'd say, actually, to be honest, taking the classic heroes of Sonic and Mario is sort of the same level to me. I'm not mad for either of them. Mm-hmm. So my drive to go and see a Sonic movie is not that great, but it just doesn't seem like, if there was like another game franchise that was getting a film and it seemed genuinely funny, I'd probably still go and see it. Whereas with Sonic, it just seems like it'll be super, I don't know, just cheesy and, it's just not my thing.
All right, our second story is about the Xbox and its X19 event, which had a surprising amount of Xbox One announcements for it. It wasn't all just focused on the next generation. Although we did get a glimpse at Rare's next project, which is called Everwild, and it looks to be another always online open world co-op experience, which some in the Destructoid community did not care for, and they made that very clear in the comments. We also got our first look at Age of Empires 4. Nod's next project called Tell Me Why. Microsoft Flight Simulator is coming back, and it looks amazing. And we also got a release date for Wasteland 3. We also found out about Project xCloud, which is Microsoft's game streaming service. Then it will be coming to PC next year, as currently apparently only on Android devices. Did anyone watch the show or catch any of the updates that they are excited about?
I'm really curious about Tell Me Why, but it's... I don't know if I'm kind of ready to... So Life is Strange and Before the Storm it's called, right? The successor series. This was a long time ago that I played it, but even now I feel like it was just so heavy that I'm dragging my heels about playing season 2 of Life is Strange, and playing another really heavy narrative game from Don't Nod is just probably not high up on my list of things to play, but it looks pretty cool. So like when I'd be in the mood for that sort of game, I think I'd definitely give it a try. And it looks really good. It looks great actually, but I just I'm wondering when I will be in the right headspace to play it. But as soon as I am, I will play it.
I think it was certainly the most interesting announcement out of this show, not necessarily just because of that it's because of it's a .nod, but because it kind of shows, at least for Microsoft, how far we're kind of coming as an industry and what type of games we highlight in our shows. 5 years ago, there probably wouldn't be a big push to highlight a game featuring a transgender character as one of the main characters that was put together by a publisher or by a developer that worked very closely with GLAD in order to get it right. I mean, we've had games like that. Well, not necessarily that they work with GLAD, but we've had games with queer and transgender characters in the past, but they've always been like little indie projects that you kind of just hear about from websites, and they don't get a big push from the publishers. And to see something like that get a push from, one of the 3 big console manufacturers, it was, even if I'm not going to play the game, because as you said, Life is Strange, Don't Nod games are extremely heavy content that I may not just ever be in the right mood to play. It is refreshing to see that is something that that they are pushing and that they are comfortable pushing in this current climate. It really does show that this industry is changing in ways that are for the better. Another example of this is in Outer Worlds. There's an asexual character that they get, an asexual character that they get absolutely right from everything I've read. Like, this is the best character in the game is Ace. So I like seeing all of the strides that we're making as an industry that were pushed by indie developers with their visual novels and their little indie games that they sold on itch.io and maybe got onto Steam, that it's now progressing into these bigger, larger companies that, they're still kind of small, and maybe it's not like, Respawn is making something with, a trans character as one of the main characters, but to see representation in a major event show is as a member of the LGBT community, it's nice. I like it. I want to see more of it.
You are listening to Podtoid.
All right, we are just about out of time, but before we go, Occams, we have a community shout-out this week?
We do. Old Zio, community member Zio, posted a really great community blog. Not just a quick post, but an actual blog on a company known as Puppet Combo Games. And I've been reading it. I've recently got into Puppet Combo Games and have just been falling down a bit of a rabbit hole, watching playthroughs and looking at their merch, T-shirts, and like you can buy compilation demo discs and things. But it's a great start of if you want to read that, it's a great primer rather for hearing about this company that makes games that are like Silent Hill era PS1 horror games. There's a lot of love, a lot of weirdness. There's some really innovative shit. I think it's one guy from what I understand, but there seems to be other people. But I think the driving force is one fella. And it's a great blog to read. There's a lot of love there. And it's really cool to kind of He's talking about indie games and stuff. It's nice to find people still making kind of weird, refreshing horror games using some outdated ass graphics that really work well.
There's something particularly creepy about old graphics as well, isn't there? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is.
I remember when I was playing Undertale, which has scary elements but isn't really kind of a horror game. But just because of how it looks, when I went in like blind, not know, I was constantly waiting for something to like jump out at me or terrify me, or because there's just something naturally uneasy about those kind of old school graphics. I think a weird like creepy factor to them.
I do like the new influx of retro indie games. Last week or earlier this month, I wrote about that Faith trilogy is coming to consoles, and that is like Atari level graphics, but it's such a good game. So I cannot wait for more people to experience that. But that's awesome. I will have to check out that blog. And that is it for the show. On behalf of Chris, Charlotte, Occams, and myself, thank you for listening. And don't forget to subscribe on Google Play, iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, and subscribe to the Destructoid YouTube channel. Are they gone?
Yep.
All right, it's time for Spoilsport. Yep, still hate that theme song. Welcome to Spoilsport. It's the show after a show where we discuss the latest and greatest in films. Today, I am joined by Charlotte. Charlotte, thank you for joining me.
Hey, nice to be here.
Yes. This is a special episode of Spoilsport. We're not talking about the kind of movies that we usually talk about on the show. We usually cover superhero films, sci-fi, video game movies, Joker. Today, we're going to be talking about Parasite, which is the latest film from, and by the way, all these names are Korean, and so I'm very sorry if I mess up pronouncing any and all of them. But it's Bong Joon-ho. Is that even close to being right? Who you might know as the director of Snowpiercer, which is excellent, or The Host, which is the Korean monster movie that probably put him on the map with most film aficionados in the West. Do you remember what the first film of his that you've seen, Charlotte?
This is the first film of his that I've seen.
Really?
Yep.
I strongly suggest you watch Snowpiercer. I don't know what services they have it on over there in Germany, but it is very good. So Parasite it's playing in limited release right now in the United States. I can only assume it's the same in Germany, where you saw it, Charlotte. Did you have to travel far to see this film?
No, in fact, it seems to be pretty widespread compared to the US and the UK.
Really?
It's on 3 different cinemas, but it's also dubbed into German, which is really weird. So it must have got enough popularity that they decided to dub it. And I went to see it at a small cinema, which it does a mix of popular films and artsy type films, but it's also one at the local chain cinema as well. So seems to be pretty easy to go and see it. Well, if you live in a big city like I do, it's pretty easy to go and see it.
Yeah, I live in a small town and had to drive 3.5 hours to the nearest theater that was playing it. I was on the trip for another reason, but I made sure to squeeze in a viewing of Parasite because it's gotten such great reviews. And, when you see in the trailer, the words come up from the reviews is like, you go in thinking it's one thing, but then it turns into another. Like, there's no more intriguing of a line to get me excited about a film than that. Like, that is perfect. So yeah, we're going to be discussing Parasite today. And as a warning, if you have never listened to Spoilsport before, we do spoil every facet of the film. So if you are planning on seeing Parasite and you want to go in as ill-informed as possible, which I suggest you do, stop listening right now. All right, so let's get right into it. The movie opens with the Kim family consisting of parents Ki-taek, Chung-suk, and the adult children Ki-woo and Ki-jong. Again, I apologize if I butcher these names. And the first thing we see for comedic effect is that this is a very poor family. They can't afford Wi-Fi, so the only signal they can get is like above the toilet in their bathroom. They take odd jobs through WhatsApp. Their basement apartment is inundated with water bugs, and so they leave the windows open when the street sprayers come through. They're just absolutely poor. And then one day, one of Ki-woo's friends from school shows up with an opportunity. He asks him to take his place as an English tutor for a rich family, the Parks. Ki-woo gets the job with the help of his sister Ki-jong and her Photoshop skills. He impresses Mrs. Park. I didn't write down her first name, and I don't trust what is on. I don't trust what is on Wikipedia because I think they got some of the names wrong. But he impresses Mrs. Park. She's very easily manipulated, and soon after that, Ki-woo gets his sister a job, posing as an art teacher for the Park's troubled son, and that's introduced with one of the more prominent moments from the trailer where they're at the key entry to the house and they're going over little Chicago, Illinois, his sister. So he gets her a job at this house. So you have these two kind of poor young adults who get a job by conning these rich people into helping them out. There's nothing really nefarious about it. They're just kind of, they're moving in on this family to kind of help themselves out of the situation they're in. And this is when we meet the Park's driver who gives Ki-jong a ride home. And Charlotte, I don't know about you, but for me, this is the moment the movie started to change. Like, what did you think this was up until this point?
I'm not sure if it was this moment.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like it was telegraphed earlier that this was going to be a big scam heist, at least for part of the film. I guess in a way it was significant, this moment, because it told me that even the children in the family were a lot cleverer than your average scam artist, and that they could think up these schemes way in advance, and how it leads to every single member of the family getting involved is kind of... they're an organized scammer family, and they must have done similar things to this before. Probably not on this level, probably not infiltrating a family, but they have done serious stuff in the past, is what this moment in the car kind of told me.
Yeah, because you hear she is gifted with art, the Ki-jong. And then Ki-woo, he is, you find out that he's kind of actually really smart and really great with English, which is why he's the one that his friend comes to for this English tutor gig instead of his frat brothers. But I just thought that I did not expect the rest of the family to get involved until she's in the back of that car and she removes her underwear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true, actually. There's no indication in really that... the mother and the father are going to get involved.
Yeah, they just seem like this poor, unemployed couple who live with their adult kids in this shitty basement apartment.
Yeah.
But that is when it really does start to change. So Ki-jong leaves her underwear in the car and gets their driver fired. And Ki-taek, who is the father of the Kim family, he used to be a driver. That was one of his many old jobs. And so they lie to the Parks in order to get him hired as their driver. So now 3 of the 4 family members are being hired based on lies by the Park family, which only leaves Chung-suk, who is the mother, still unemployed. Working for the Parks currently is Gook Moon-gwang, who is the housekeeper and a holdover from the original owner, and this is a designer, an Architectural Digest designer house. It's beautiful. It's like there's cement stairs. I love the look of this house. What about you, Charlotte?
Yeah, it was really attractive. Though what was notable is if this film had taken place in maybe the UK or the US, it would have been like a mansion, and it didn't look like a mansion. It was very sparse and minimalist.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it just oozed this person who owns this house is rich.
Definitely. Yeah.
In the details as well, things like the fridges being fully stocked, having the Voss water bottles placed everywhere, just attention to detail was excellent.
Yeah, and there's also something like really cold about this house, because no part of it, except for maybe the kids' room, seems like it has any warmth of it, because there is so much concrete around that it looks like this is a house to be admired but not lived in. Is something that I kind of saw with it. Anyways, back to the plot line. So there's Gook Moon-gwang, who is the housekeeper. And the Kim family starts scheming of ways to get rid of her, and they discover that she is deathly allergic to peaches. which are banned from this house. So in the original trailer, when you see the young Korean woman slowly blowing on that peach and the fuzz flying off of it, that's her carrying out the plan to get rid of this housekeeper. And so they blow the peach fuzz on the woman and convince the Park family that she has tuberculosis, because at this point the Parks are just 100% trusting of this family that they don't know is a family that has moved in, because the part of the scheme is that none of these people are related to one another. Key-Tech who is supposed to be like a famous driver or a well respected driver who worked for I think Ki Jeong's either her parents or her family. It is all part of this lie. So in this lie, none of these people are related. But anyways, they blow Peach Fuzz onto Moon Gwang and convince the Park family she has tuberculosis. They fire her, getting Chung Sook hired, pretending that she is like this a maid that's part of this exclusive housekeeping service that you can only find out about by business card. And this is when things start to change. And Charlotte, I just want to know what was going through your mind kind of at this point when the Kim family has completely inundated themselves into the Park family.
I was expecting, because there is a flash in the trailer that makes you think it's going to take a horrific turn. I was wondering if they were going to start murdering off the host family. Mm-hmm. And that moment never came. And I was like, and there was also, so the sort of moment where things do take a turn is where the host family have gone off on a holiday to celebrate the young son's birthday. They go camping, and the entire family basically go into the home and treat it like their own. And they're drinking and they're being slobs, and they're clearly not behaving in the house like the Park family behave. Yeah. And there's a moment where the wife calls the husband a cockroach as a joke, and it looks like he's going to commit an act of domestic violence against her, and then suddenly they just burst into laughter, and you never quite know whether it was like actually a joke or whether he was about to hit her and got stopped, and it was all very queasy and uncomfortable. Yeah.
I think that scene also when they're just destroying their liquor cabinet of this house and all of their snacks. It's also the only point in the film after the opening where at least one of the Kim family members starts to get a little bit of their humanity back. Because at this point, at the very beginning of the film, you're kind of rooting for the Kims because they're just so poor that it's okay that they take advantage of this family that is just so rich. But then you have the dad in this moment asking if the driver they got fired was able to find another job. And he's the only one in the family who seems to care about the people that they've replaced. Because like they don't care about the housekeeper who they nearly killed with her peach allergy. But he just wants to make sure that, he makes it a point to make sure that this driver would have been able to get another job. And, immediately the daughter, Ki Jeong, is just like, well, what the, fuck him. What about us? Pay attention to us. And so, that's a point for me where it's just like, okay, I can't totally hate this family because at least the dad shows, and maybe because he's older and because he's gone through, you find out he's gone through a lot of jobs in his life, that maybe he, has a lot more experience with this kind of crap and losing jobs compared to his kids who seem to only be slacker con artists. But yeah, and this scene is once again where the movie changes.
Yeah, but also there is the hint that the mother, so you see her practicing her shot putting, and there's also a picture up in their house of her presumably taking part in shot put at university. There's the hint that something has gone wrong with this family before and they've not always been poor, and that the kids are kind of the generation that's just used to acting like this, and it's the grown-ups who are sort of scarred by their experiences, and this is why they're acting in this way.
Yeah. And this is kind of where the theme of the movie comes into full view, which is that Parasite is definitely about classes, classes of citizens, poor and rich citizens, and how we view and treat each other, because. Well, I guess we should, before we get into this discussion, because it happens a little bit later in the scene, but so they are at the Parks family house. I've also officially reached the end of the notes I've written down because I ran out of time, so I'm just doing this all in my memory. They're at the Park family house. You have the scene that you talked about where it looks like the father is going to punch the mother, and then they just laugh it off as, I guess, one of their sick type of humor. And at this point, they've destroyed a lot of glasses, like liquor bottles. Like they've thrown it on the ground. They wiped off this table, and so there's glass all over. And then you have the knock at the door, and it's pouring outside. The Park family has gone has gone camping for like you said, the son, to celebrate his birthday. And then you have a knock at the door, and it is the housekeeper returning. It is Moon Gwang, who said that she has left something in the basement. And so she also tells them, this is important for later in the film, that she has cut the CCTV cameras of the neighboring houses so that no one's going to know that she's there. So they let her in. The rest of the family hides because Chung Suk is the only one who's supposed to be there. And she goes down to the basement, and it's just like, what the hell is going on? And then they go down and find her trying to push this cabinet out of the way. And Chung Suk helps her, and they push the cabinet, and there is a secret door to I guess a safe room or someplace to hide. And they go down into this area, down, I don't know, 3 flights of stairs, and they find that Moon Gwang was hiding her husband in this house because, like the Kims, they also have extreme money problems. They got in debt to loan sharks, and they don't, and as they said, they don't back down from finding you. And so in order to keep the husband alive, they've been hiding him in this secret cellar for years. And I was floored at this revelation, because like so much of this film, I did not see this coming.
Yeah. And it's sort of a symbol for how the Park family never see anything in this film coming, and everything that's below in the basement, because they have the luxury of having people do stuff for them and not really having the full layout of their own house because they don't need to go into the basement. Yeah, we just never see anything below there until the housekeeper comes and unlocks that door. I was completely shocked. I didn't see it coming at all, but I didn't really appreciate it because I've watched a few YouTube videos critiquing the film just before we recorded this podcast, but I didn't realize that actually it's supposed to be an idea of how there is a level of poverty even below the family, the Parasite family, so to speak.
The Kims, yeah.
Yeah, because they don't have kids. They are so poor that the husband needs to live below in the basement to avoid getting killed by loan sharks. And there's later on there's a lot of communication that sort of hints that they are sort of a class even lower than the servant family, so to speak.
I mean, that is a good point. I mean, it goes to show how easy it is for the rich to ignore the poor, that you could be literally living right beneath them and they wouldn't even notice you. And so you have the husband in the scene, or the Moon Gwang and her husband, and they're down there, and she's like giving him, I think it's like a baby bottle or something, just something of formula, because he's gone without food for days. She was his only supply of food that she would, as she made mention, she bought with her own money in order to keep him fed. But then the rest of the Kim family comes down the stairs, falls down, and then they refer to each other as family members. And this is when Moon Gwang realizes that she now has the upper hand. And a big part of this movie, a big element, is the use of cell phones and how prevalent they are in our society. And so you have Moon Gwang quickly film this family referring to themselves as, a father and son and sister. And now she then turns the table on the Kims. And the next thing you have is them back up in the living room, and the Kims are on their hands and knees, hands up, or they're on their knees, their hands are up as they're being basically held hostage by Moon Gwang and this video that she has of them. And, she, for this entire film, has always been kind of prim and proper up until the moment when she's like desperate to get in the house. But at this point, like her and her husband are just like reveling in their misery. And for me, it painted a weird picture of these characters and showed how kind of multi-layered they are. Is that you had her who is just so proud to be this housekeeper in this gorgeous architectural house, who's just like kind of trashy when she gets a little bit of power.
A lot of this film is about people thinking they are superior to other people rather than seeing things from their point of view. So the two, even though the families have a lot in common, they end up fighting with each other, and at no point do they seem to be, united against the family the Parks that have a lot of privilege and just waste it. They're just infighting of the poor, which is a lot of what we see nowadays. Is, for example, in the UK at the moment, there's a big row going on about whether McDonald's workers should earn that 30,000 a year, because shouldn't nurses be earning 30,000 a year, because they don't. And instead of questioning whether maybe pay should be better for everybody, it's like what's the word? If you divide, if you make people fight against each other that have the same interest, then they're not going to go after the people they should be going after, basically.
Yeah. And we have that same thing, like literally same debate here in the U.S. Whenever McDonald's workers threaten to go on strike for a $15 an hour wage, you have people like, I don't make $15 an hour. Why should they make $15 an hour? Instead of, why don't we all make at the very least $15 an hour? So that is a debate we're having over here as well. So back to the film, you have the Kim family on their knees, hands up, and the Moon Gwang and her husband are just kind of celebrating and reveling in their misery. But then they get the upper hand. Chung Sook manages to tackle Moon Gwang. They get the phone, they delete it, and they send both of them back down to the basement when they get a call from the Park family, the rich family, that camping trip was cut short, so we're going to be coming home. So they have, I think it's like 12 minutes to get Moon Gwang and her husband back down into the lower basement, the secret cellar, and also to make this meal. And so they push all the broken glass from their liquor underneath the couch. They get this meal made. Moon Gwang manages to run up the stairs, and Chung Sook kicks her down back into the basement, and she smacks her head against this cement post. And you think she's dead, but she's living. And so Kai-tek drags her down to the basement. They manage to get back up, but they can't escape the house before the Kims come home, and so they hide underneath this table. And this is kind of the moment where Kai-tek and the Kims realize what the Parks actually think about them. Because you have the son who still wants to camp, so he sets up this tent out in their backyard in the pouring rain, and the Mr. and Mrs. Park decide to keep watch over him on the couch. And so then they start talking about kind of the stuff that's been happening to them, and as they're about to have sex on this couch with the Kim family underneath the table right in front of them. And so Mr. Park talks about the smell of Kai-tek, that he kind of smells like cabbage. He smells like what you smell like if you ride the subway. The wife talks about the panties that they found in the car and talks about how they're cheap and how that kind of turns her on. And so, like, they're kind of they're fetishizing the poverty that the Kim family goes into with the underwear line. But then you have Kai-tek realizing that even though he is a driver for a respected family and they think he is a respectable driver, they still kind of hold him in contempt based on his smell. And yeah.
But it's worth pointing out that the Park family don't come across, at least to me, didn't come across as terrible people. They just came across as completely oblivious, like the wife. So the husband seems to have some idea of how the world works, and he came from a slightly less, what's the word? I can't find the English words today. Less privileged class than his wife. His wife seems to be the typical bored housewife who there's implications that she might be taking, sort of the usual housewife helpers because she's sort of passed out on a table at the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like they're just typical rich people who've completely lost sight of what it's like to be, or never knew what it's like to be poorer.
Yeah.
So that's what's really cool about this film is that the director doesn't paint these horrible rich people and these brilliant poorer people. It's a lot more realistic and nuanced than that. And I think in some ways obliviousness is a lot more harmful than pure evil sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and that to me kind of that really painted or let me know of where this film was going to go from this point. So you have the Kim family underneath the table listening to the Parks have sex on their couch, talking all this trash about them, and they manage to get out of the house undetected. But as we said, it's pouring down rain. And so they race back to their basement apartment, and the entire street is flooded. And their windows were left open, and so their apartment is also completely flooded, and they're going in to just kind of save whatever it is they can save. The son goes and gets the I can't remember what the rock is at the beginning of the film that they were given that basically set off the entire events of this film. But he goes and gets this sentimental rock that his friend gave him when he told him about the job. The daughter runs in and like tries to stop the toilet from overflowing, but then just sits on it and lights up a cigarette. And then the father kind of saves what he can. And so their apartment is just completely wrecked by this storm, and they have to go to this shelter. And this is a part of the movie where I went to the bathroom, so I don't know the conversation that he had with his son at this point. But they're at the shelter, and obviously they smell awful because their toilet was backing up. And then they get the next morning they get a phone call from the Park family saying, "Hey, we want to put together a birthday party for our son because the camping trip is rained out. Please come into work today." And so they invite the entire family in. And Chung Sook is fine. She was not at the apartment, at the basement apartment when it was flooded, so she's still at the nice big house. But the other three, they reek of high heaven, and so they have to, they're at this shelter and they're just taking clothes out of a pile to wear to this birthday party that they can't say no to. And so at this point, Ki-taek is now driving around the mother to pick up supplies for the birthday. And she recognizes his smell, and he recognizes that she is now probably thinking of him lesser because of how bad he smells due to everything that he had to endure that night before.
And it's also just she's in overdrive, just shopping, and she's talking to people on the phone and saying, "Oh, you can turn up to the party in jogging bottoms, don't worry about it, ha ha ha." And then it's obvious that because it's a society thing, they have to turn up with a present, like a bottle of champagne and dressed to the nines.
She keeps saying no presents.
Yeah. So it's just underlining how completely oblivious they are, especially since it's not his job to do the shopping for her. He's their driver. Yeah. So.
And the Park family kind of keeps treating it like, we're paying you to be here, so you need to be here. Like that's basically the extent of their excuse of why they need to come in, because Lord knows the Kim family wouldn't have done it unless they absolutely have to be there as part of their job. And so you have Ki-woo, who we haven't talked about it yet, but he's been seducing the daughter that he's been teaching English to, and part of his plan is that after she graduates, he's going to propose marriage so they can permanently become a member of this family. And they talk about hiring actors to play his parents and just how deep this con is going to go, saying that his sister has been hired to play a family member at a wedding in the past. But then after everything that happened the night before, he's questioning whether he would actually could actually be a part of that. And so in this moment, he decides to go down to the lower basement where where Moon Gwang and her husband are supposedly tied up and waiting for them. So he grabs this ceremonial rock and starts heading downstairs. And I'm like just on the edge of my seat. What the hell is he going to do right now? Is he going to bludgeon them to death with it? Is he going to make a peace offering? I have no freaking clue what is going on here. So he gets down to the bottom of the cellar, and Moon Gwang, because she was kicked down the stairs and hit her head on the cement post, she died of a concussion. She's dead down there. And he goes to look at her body, and then behind him, you just see this little loop, plastic or metal loop, come above his head, and it's the husband about to strangle him, Moon Gwang's husband. And so he's strangling him. He manages, Ki-woo manages to get away, make it up the stairs, but the husband is following him. He still has this thing around his neck choking him, and when he makes it up to the stairs, the husband's able to grab it and slam him onto the ground, and then he takes the rock, the ceremonial stone that Ki-woo took down with him, and I thought he was going to bash his brains in. That is what I was waiting for, was just to see his brains splatter. What were you thinking when the husband picked up that rock above his head?
I thought he was dead. I didn't think he survived that.
Yeah.
Oh, spoiler alert! Spoiler alert within spoiler alert. I thought he was gone. Like it was just because it was even though you didn't see brain splatter, you saw a lot of blood.
Yeah. Because when he pulled on that thing around his neck, Ki-woo just smacked his head against the ground. But then when the husband throws the rock, like it looks like it might have hit his head a little bit, but it mostly just slams into the ground. But like you, I thought he was dead because there was just so much fucking blood. And so you have the husband who, before his wife died, before Moon Gwang told him died, she said, Chung Suk, remember that name. She's the one who pushed me down the stairs. And so the husband, who has mostly spent his life down in this basement, comes up during this nice, big, elegant party in the backyard. And he grabs a knife and he makes his way out to the party. And then as Ki Jong, who is the Kim daughter, is participating in this little Native American themed birthday party, she's supposed to be kidnapped, and then the young son of the Parks is supposed to come rescue her. The husband of Moon Gwang comes out and stabs her in the chest, and she falls to the ground, bleeding heavily. And then he is looking for Chung Suk, and Chung Suk manages to tackle his ass, and they start fighting all over the ground. And in this time, another important fact that happened earlier in the film, Ki Jong deduces that something happened to the Park's young son back in the first grade. And we find out that on one of his birthday parties earlier, he was down in the kitchen having cake when he looked towards the basement and saw a ghost. But it wasn't a ghost, it was Moon Gwang's husband coming up from the cellar, but not supposed to be. But he looked very ghostly. And so the son, the Park son, went into a seizure. And the Mrs. Park has a discussion about how long it takes or how long you have to save a child having a seizure, which is 15 minutes, which is how long it would take for an ambulance to get there from a hospital. And so at this moment, when the husband stabs Ki Jong, the boy sees him, has a flashback, and goes into a seizure. And so now you have the panic moment for the Park for the Kim family, that you have these four people, three because Ki-woo is in the basement and maybe dead, who are not supposed to be related to one another. They're not really supposed to know one another. That now they have to decide between the con of, do you help your daughter or do you let her die and keep your job? And it's in this moment that you have Chung Suk and the husband fighting. She manages to get the upper hand and stabs him with a barbecue skewer. And the Park family has their son in their arms, telling Ki Tek to leave behind Ki Jong, who is dying, and drive them to the hospital because they only have 15 minutes.
I have to just interrupt here, but because I've
Go
got a
ahead.
bit of personal experience with childhood seizures, that's when I heard the wife saying that, I thought she was being hysterical because everything's different and certain kinds of seizures you just need to sort of wait for them to pass.
Yeah.
So because she was generally saying, "Oh, he had a seizure," and whenever a child has a seizure, I was like, "Nah, she's being like exaggerating or hysterical here." So when they were trying to cart him away, I was to take him to the hospital. I was like, well, of course this is less important than somebody bleeding to death on the ground.
Yeah. And although at this point there are now 3 people bleeding because Chung Sook's been cut at this point, and then you have the husband who is just like bleeding out his side because of the barbecue skewer, and Mr. Park tells Ki-taek to throw him the keys, and so he does, but the keys get, because of the brawl between the husband and Chung Sook, it gets stuck underneath the husband as he's dying, and then Mr. Park goes to get the keys, grabs them, but then realizes how bad the husband smells because, he's been underground for so many years, as he picks up the keys. And this is when Ki-taek snaps.
I thought it was leading up to that at some point. I thought that one of the Parks was going to get murdered, if not all of them. So it didn't really come as a surprise.
It didn't come as a surprise for me, and I was kind of on the same page as you. When I saw the second trailer to this film, I was thinking, oh, so they're just going to replace them in the movie. But no, that's not what happened. But it was, to me, it made perfect sense of why he did it, because they'd been building up this idea that they're ingraining themselves with this rich family, and then they see this other family that is even poorer than them, but surely we're better than them. But then when Mr. Park picks up the keys and just acknowledges the awful smell of the husband who is from the basement, it tells Ki-taek right there, he sees us the same. That he will always, like, to him, to Mr. Park, this guy who is just this weirdo poor guy who's been living in his basement is the same as me, because we both have a smell they can't stand.
Yeah, and like it's something that really resonated with me because there's things like I've noticed from okay, so this is not really, I'm not saying this is a level of poverty, but if when you find that you can't afford or you don't have the ability to install a tumble dryer in your apartment, instead you have to dry clothes by hanging them up, and you can't do that in your apartment, but you have to do it in the attic because of rules in rented accommodation saying you can't hang stuff up in your apartment. What inevitably happens is that some of your clothes smells a bit because you can't get stuff properly dry during the winter. So there is like, I've had that experience where coming from a family where it was just a given that we had a tumble dryer growing up, and now that I actually have to work for stuff and I'm sort of at a level now where I can't afford and I can't have a tumble dryer. It's like the smell thing.
Yeah.
I kind of that really resonates with me. I mean, it's not on the same level. Like, God, no, I'm not. I'm not saying that I'm poorer. I'd say somewhere in the middle of the part. I'm nowhere near as rich as the Parks and nowhere near as poor as the other family. But it's something that people can identify with. It doesn't even have to be like the smell they're talking about is not necessarily when they're talking about it in the when they're watching the sun outside.
Yeah.
They're talking about the smell of the subway. It's not like the smell of somebody who's not washed for 3 weeks. It's just the smell of people who can't have a driver drive them around everywhere,
Yeah.
So that sort of upset me, and sort of I understood it.
No, definitely. And smell is generally something that everyone who's watching this film can relate to, because we have all been around someone who is less well off than us, who has a smell to them. I used to work in San Francisco, which is full of homeless people. So I was treated to that smell every single day. And so I think it's, even though when I worked in San Francisco, I wasn't well off. I was still like very, very, very lower middle class or upper poor class. I'm not sure where I would be in this case. But it's definitely something that we kind of all can use to look down on someone else. If we come across someone who smells, we can immediately think, oh, they must not shower, they must not wash their clothes, whatever things run in our mind, because smell is such a strong sense that is easy to make deductions from. When you have a strong smell, you can immediately go into thinking what is causing that smell, and if it's coming from a person, you start questioning the choices and decisions that person has made.
Yeah.
So Keatek stabs Mr. Park, kills him. The mother, Mrs. Park, who is holding their son who's having a seizure, faints. And Keatek runs away. I should also note at this point, you see all the guests running because, a stabbing has taken place at this birthday party. And one of the shots you have is of the daughter who is taking English lessons. She is carrying Kiwoo out on her back. Like, she is screaming for help. He is again, we presume he's dead at this point. And she's carrying him out. Ki-jong, the daughter of the Kims, she is still clinging to life on the ground. She's asking her dad not to press down on her wound because it hurts too much. But he runs, and it cuts to a few weeks later, I think, or maybe a few months later, after the party. And you have Kiwoo survived. He survived the head trauma of having his head slammed against the floor and the rocks just barely missing his skull. And he now has weird laughing fits when he's in situations like that's the emotion he can express is just laughter. And this moment when he's being questioned by the police is the only moment that I'm like, okay, what's going on with this translation? Because they mentioned, I don't know if they did this in Germany, but they mentioned the Miranda rights, and I assumed Miranda rights is something that's uniquely American. Did they have anything like that in Germany? Like, did they, like when he was reading his rights, did they mention by name what those rights are called?
No, it's just very generic from what I remember.
Okay.
Just how am I supposed to inform him of his rights or something?
Okay. Yeah, for us, they did Miranda rights, which is named after a court case that the Supreme Court heard saying that that police have to give you your rights when they are arresting you. And so it was really weird to see that. That's like the only moment in the movie I'm like, okay, they probably shouldn't have called it that.
But that's an interesting point, because I don't think I realized that was what it was. I thought it was just they were informing him of criminal proceedings and not that they were actually putting him under arrest. So maybe that was a problem with the German dub, that it wasn't clear enough.
Or maybe it's that'll be a territorial thing. Like in the U.S., it's done as the Miranda rights. In Germany, it's done as how you had it maybe in France, and in England, it's done as something else. That it could just be they localize that to what's the easiest for the local audience to understand.
Yeah.
So after this moment, he's questioned by the police, and then you find out that Ki-jong, his sister, did die, and she is. I think just her ashes are interred at this mass burial site or mass tomb that his mother and him go and visit her at. And again, he can't help himself from laughing. His mother, Chung-suk, and him are both given probation for all of their crimes, for fraud, identity theft, just all of the crimes that they're given probation. And then Keatek, the husband, he is nowhere to be seen. And if you remember, we told you earlier, when the original housekeeper returned, she cut all the CCTVs cameras. And so no one knows where he is. The family doesn't know where he is. At this point, we don't find out what happened to the Kim's or the Park's son, the one who was having the seizure. They never really mention if he died or not, because it obviously would have been way more than 15 minutes with his mother collapsing. And so you have Chung-suk and Ki-woo returning to their really shitty basement apartment. And then every once in a while, Ki-woo goes up into the hills behind the house that everything took place at, and just kind of watches the new family that is there. And he notices that in the stairway to the house, there are lights blinking in a Morse code formation. And this is something that they talked about earlier in the film. The husband who was stuck in the basement would touch the lights to kind of welcome Mr. Park home when he came home. It would light up as he walked up the stairs. And so he notices that they're blinking in a Morse code formation, and you find out, based on the message that he reads from it, that is where Ki-tek, the father, is hiding. That after stabbing the dad, the only place he knew that no one would find him would be in the same cellar where Moon-gwang kept her husband. And so he is stuck down there, a fugitive from the law, sneaking up when he can with this new family to get food and survive. And you have the son somehow, like he's writing a message to his dad. I don't know how in the world he's going to get this to him. But he mentions that he's going to forget about school for now, and he's going to make a lot of money, and he's going to buy this house so that his dad can finally come out of the dark. And it cuts to this scene of an older Ki-woo with his mother at the house, looking around it, and they're both very well dressed. He looks very well off, very rich, like he has made the money he said he was going to make. And they buy the house, and then the dad emerges from the basement, finally able to see his family again. And then that scene fades away, and it cuts back to the shitty basement apartment where Ki-woo is writing the note, because none of that has happened. And that devastated me. Like, at this point, even though I kind of hate the Kims for what they did, seeing that kind of uplifting ending only to be crushed by the reality killed me.
I don't know. It didn't come as much of a surprise to me, so I don't think it was as much of a gut punch for me. I'm trying to think how I felt though. I felt kind of sad, but at the same time, like, this.
It's tough to say because they are generally a bad family, who then had a lot of bad stuff happen to them. Like, they lost their daughter. That is a devastating thing to happen. But the only person of them who has a little bit of humanity, or who at least showed it right before the end, the dad, is the one who takes the brunt of the punishment of the family members who are still alive. And, he is now in a position that he looked down on. Like, he asked Moon-gwang and her husband, how could you live like this? How could you do this? Looking down on them the same way that, they suspect the Parks look down on them. That is now his life. He has now become what he looked down on.
Yeah, but in that way, it kind of plays out a bit like a parable. So it's like,
oh, absolutely.
He's sort of got a taste of his own medicine. And also, the thing that got me is that it's hard to judge, but like, did they have another alternative to dragging their entire family into a life of crime? Couldn't the parents have done their schemes and then just not involved their children? Like, how did it get to that point? So I'm like feeling like the loss of their daughter, as horrible as it was sort of a lesson learned from the fact that they got their daughter into this life, and also their son. Like, they're both like, well, actually no, because there's talk about how, and I saw some of this analysis in the YouTube videos I watched, that there's mentions that the daughter is the least criminal out of all of them, and yet she's the one to die, which is just a horrible outcome. But at the same time, she is still quite brainwashed and very adept at conning people, as is the son. So you've got to question, like, if things were so bad that they had to get into this sort of lifestyle, could they have the parents just have not done it and then not involved the two kids? I don't know. I felt for the family, don't get me wrong. I actually really liked the Kim family on the whole. But they made huge amounts of mistakes. And also this whole question, I was thinking of it right now, this question of could they have just, when they were in the shelter, just not gone back to work? What's to say that they couldn't have just called it quits? Well, what would the consequences have been?
There is that. There's also, like, they talk about, like, all four of them at this point, or at a certain point in the film, are under the pay of this family. And from what it sounds like, they're being paid a decent amount of money that you never see them spend in ways to improve their life. Like when it was raining and pouring at their apartment, was there no way for them to take some of their money that they had and just go to a hotel? Like that would at least have given them the ability to shower or even go buy new clothes the next day for this party event. I think they had to go to it to keep up the appearances because how do you get out of something that to your employer that they think that you are a well-off person? What kind of lie are you all going to coordinate for? Because at this point, none of them are family members, and so each of them would have to come up with an individual lie that would have to be believable for what the Park family think is their status in life.
I guess, but I think they could have, because there's indications, for example, that the son's art teachers have been disappearing in the sense of they find him so difficult that they just disappear off the face of the earth.
Yeah, that's true.
I guess I was thinking, why couldn't they not just disappear off the face of the earth? But then maybe they would start digging and then it would come to light what their identities actually were, and then they might get in trouble. But I feel like this is all playing out like a sort of morality lesson in a way, but at the same time you're like, yeah, but did they really have any choice but to get, like, the parents at least, did they have any choice? Because that was how they survived. I'm just feeling that the real lesson here is, why the heck did they get the kids involved? I mean, the kids started it, but at the same time the kids started it because they were taught by their parents that this was an okay thing to do.
Yeah. Because to me, it seemed like the daughter is, because she's the one who first mentioned the plan and took her underwear off. And so, like, for me, it always seemed like the entire family was into this. But yeah, at a certain point of their life, the kids had to learn that this is how our family is going to act when we have the opportunity. Because, at the very beginning, they're just folding pizza boxes, making a living in the gig economy.
And to be fair to them, so the housekeeper and her husband, they don't scam anybody.
No.
Like they suffer horribly, but they're not involved in scamming anybody. He just had a business that failed. And the husband, the Kim husband, had businesses that failed as well, I think.
Yep.
But it's sort of like, why, like, it's hard to say without sounding elitist, but like, were there alternatives, or was it just an easier way to get by than another alternative way to get by?
That's a good question. I haven't thought about that, but I'm definitely going to. All right. I think we've been talking for about an hour, so I think that's good for this episode of Spoilsport. Is there anything you wanted to add about the film, Charlotte, before we go?
Just that I think it should win an Oscar. It's just the pacing of the story, just the things that we started talking about in this episode, and it's hard to tell in a foreign language film whether the acting's any good, but I sense that the acting was very good. It's a brilliant film. There's no loose ends that I can think of, or anything with the plot that I was majorly dissatisfied with. It was just a really good experience, and I hope that they get the deserved accolades for this film, because it was magnificent.
Absolutely. It is easily the best film I've seen this year. And you are right. It should win at least one Oscar. I know everyone is talking about Bong Joon-ho and his direction and his screenplay, but really I just want to give a shout out to Song Kang-ho, who plays the dad, Kim Kai-tak. He is really good in this film, and he's been in a lot of Joon-ho's films. He was in Snowpiercer. He was in The Host. I hope he gets recognition as well, the same way that like the Academy recognized the lead actress and supporting actress in Roma last year. Like, he's very good in this film.
He puts in a really good performance. The moments where you see that he's about to snap are impeccable.
Yeah. All right, Charlotte, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, you're welcome.
This has been a very fun discussion. I'm so glad we could talk about something that's a little more art house than not just mainstream on this. So hopefully our audience likes it well, and we can continue doing this. So that is it for Spoilsport.